Now, without any waste of time, I'm going to hand over to Mr. Rupert. But before I do so, please allow me to just give you a little bit of a quick background on Mr. Rupert's background. We've got a distinguished guest today, Mr. Rupert Koopman. Rupert studied at the University of the Western Cape and majored in both botany and environmental sciences. He spent more than a decade as a botanist at Cape Nature, specializing in fynbos, specifically threatened species and habitats. Rupert now holds the position of the conservation manager for Botanical Society of South Africa, where he is finding ways to make conservation more inclusive for all South Africans, getting to know Botanical Society members and involving them in real conservation and citizen science work. I can't stress the importance of this topic today because of the work that you do, Mr. Rupert. It's absolutely off the hook, and the knowledge that you share with all of us, continue to empower us and actually make us want to become activists in making sure that we look after this amazing environment that we've got. So without any waste of time, I'm going to hand over to you, and to everybody else, I will see you guys on the other side of the call. Please remember, if you've got any questions, please leave them on the Q&A, and we'll get Mr. Rupert to answer some of them at the end of the talk. Mr. Rupert, over to you, sir. Thank you.
Thanks so much, John. I've also been a member of the Botanical Society for more than 20 years. So it's something that's kind of in the blood. I just also wanted to say thank you for this opportunity, and for Belinda behind the scenes for making sure everything's running smoothly. And yeah, let's talk about the BotSoc and South Africa's plant conservation strategy. So I, in my interactions with people, regularly get that they are aware that South Africa's environment is important, but not to the extent that it is. And it's very easy for people to go right through a very good tertiary and primary education without really grappling with and understanding that how special it is. And so I'm on the other side. I've worked in the conservation sector for a very long time now, and been able to come at it from very different angles. And it's really nice to lay that out here. But I think a foundational piece of information, and Belinda will be sharing some links as we talk, is the plant conservation strategy. And then I'm going to draw from how we at the BotSoc are interacting with various elements of the strategy and bringing it down to kind of achievable bite-sized chunks where people can contribute immediately. You don't have to be a botanist or scientist. You just need to have some internet access, a smartphone or a camera, and then we're good to go. Cool, but let's start talking about the BotSoc. So I'm pretty sure there are people on the call who've never heard of the Botanical Society. So we've been established in 1913. We know that Kirstenbosch celebrated its birthday on the 1st of July, and the BotSoc was actually started just before that because there needed to be a civil society body to support Kirstenbosch Gardens, and that's where we're from. So basically our roots are in service to the gardens, but we've spread our wings now. So we both support the botanical gardens and plant conservation and engaging our members to make that little civil society army out there. We know that environment is a place where we struggle for resources, especially as a country, because we've got so many other desperate needs to deal with. And as a result, everybody needs to put shoulder to the wheel. So, but importantly, we've got this tagline of know, grow, protect, and enjoy South Africa's indigenous plants, because it's not just about the hard science of saying there's 2,000 critically endangered species we need to look after, etc. It's also about having fun in nature and building those relationships, and it's good for our mental health too. So In 2020, BotSoc re-established its conservation program, and I was appointed as the conservation manager. And we're looking to solidify our identity as a plant conservation NGO organization. And there's a lot of stars aligning at the moment. It's the UN Decade for Ecological Restoration. And we've actually have got close more than 14,000 members. And we reckon in our membership base, there's a lot of expertise, energy, and love for plants, and not just love for plants, but, you know, highly skilled people that can assist us. And at the end, I'll drop a link to an article we wrote about volunteering in our latest Felt and Flora. So we've been working on modernizing our systems. The older people on the call will remember the old BotSoc card being a paper one, which was wrapped in plastic, and we've now got a permanent one, and we don't even need a card because you can use your barcode from web tickets as your means of access or for any other activities that we do. And so we've got this strategic framework that we operate within. It's our transformation strategy, our marketing strategy, and conservation, and they're pretty much interlinked. So, you know, it's not separate things. And when we talk about transformation, we talk about the transformation of ourselves as an organization to be more accessible to South Africans of all backgrounds. And, you know, we've got international members too. But also, how do we transform the relationship that we have with nature and make things better? Marketing, as you know, is important, but again, not empty marketing, but our marketing is infused with our conservation message and so forth. So we need to get that right from a content and so on point of view as well. And then obviously conservation, where we're going to dive deep now. I'm going to let you have a quick look under the hood of what are the strategic kind of frameworks that support our conservation work. And then we'll talk about how you can all hook in. So to introduce the National Plant Conservation Strategy, and if Belinda could drop that link in the chat on SANBI's website, there's an international plant conservation strategy. And generally, because the flora of South Africa is so big, beautiful, and vast, we need to adjust these documents for local use. And there was a 2-year period of coordination and meetings to put together the initial document. And there are 16 targets, which include things like the red list and online flora, conservation of protected lands, threatened species propagation, the protection of crop wild relatives. And that's really an interesting thing, as John was mentioning the weather, because it's a way of ensuring that we bolster our food plants with their wild relatives through conventional and other breeding, so that we can include food security in an increasingly changing world. Environmental education, please check out the long list for those 16 targets. And so that's been the plant conservation kind of backbone for the activities in the country. So it's signed off by the minister. And we're currently working with a team to update it for the next round. So there was a set of targets. Now we need to see if we reach those targets, adjust them, and so forth. So this is an iterative process. So our conservation strategy is directly drawn from that. But because we're an NGO and we, at the moment, have limited resources, we needed to narrow it down so we could focus and make sure that the emphasis that we put goes into a specific place. And so we've got these 5 core goals in our strategy. It's the monitoring of key species and identification of important plant areas, securing key sites for plant conservation, reducing the ongoing loss of plant species and sites rich in botanical assets, supporting the botanical gardens in their propagation of key species and reintroduction into important plant areas. So you'll notice that's not just the National Botanical Gardens, but like we'll work with botanical gardens everywhere. And then building the capacity of professional botanists and increasing the awareness of the importance of botanical assets in all sectors of society. And the last part of that sentence is why I'm here today. And we're also, I'm going to be showing at least one example from each of these goals, how we interact. And let's get into it. So before we get into it, I just want to talk about our infrastructure that supports the conservation strategy. So we've got a BotSoc Conservation Committee, which is chaired by Kevin McCann from the BotSoc Council. And the members are a combination of our council members, botanical and conservation experts, and branch representatives, and we co-opt people as necessary. So it's a tight group which almost serves as a peer review mechanism to ensure that our work stays on track and is relevant. So an important part of all of this is actually our spatial identity as BotSoc. So we know we're the Botanical Society of South Africa, but as someone who's worked with vegetation mapping and conservation planning for a big chunk of time to provide specialist botanical inputs, the power of maps really does give us an idea of, and this is quite rudimentary, but where things are, and also how to interact with different data sets and give us information. So this is kind of what we started on. So at the beginning of last year, we started on a quite intensive mapping process to make sure that we've got our boundaries of the maps of the branches sorted out across the country, because then that allows us to intersect with all the conservation information, and we can empower our branches by giving them targeted info. Because if you were to look at a branch like the Free State, Bloemfontein, it's the entire province of Free State, which is the branch boundary. And we want to make sure that within that massive boundary, we give them an achievable and priority list of botanical targets to point their attention towards. And that's also, you know, the branches have got the autonomy to do their own thing. Like, for example, Free State will also be running plant sales, and they're famous for their Kai apple jam. And all the branches have got their own identity and things that they're interested in. But we just, from my portfolio side, want to make sure that they've got a concise set of information which helps them make decisions when they want to be doing conservation work. So this is what it looks like in practice. Is we had a set of Zoom meetings with the branches, and that's been another good thing that we've been able to do in the last period, is to adjust to the current realities of not being able to travel as much. And then we start getting this sort of information that we give to the branches. So we sat down with these two branches, KZN Inland and KZN Coastal, and adjusted it. So if you look at the previous map, Coastal is quite a narrow strip, and you'll see that's now widened a bit, and also the shape of Inland has changed as well, because we're both taking into account botanical and biodiversity information, but also political information. So that this kind of boundary over here, if you can see my cursor, lines up with the district municipality boundaries in that area, so that we can operate within defined areas. That helps when we start doing things like working with the municipalities. And also, why this line is a bit thicker is because the branch itself got a bit thicker, is because we use the vegetation map, and there's an approximate line there of the coastal belt of grasslands, and then it goes into the Midlands essentially. So you've got two distinct geographic units, and that also means that you have you know, each one will have a slightly different set of parameters that you're working with, different set of plants, different set of vegetation, and so on. And out of that, then we've drawn up a kind of 10-page report for branches, which gives them this level of information. So we've drawn information from the South African vegetation map. I've been referring to the important plant areas map a lot. So that is work that's been done by Kavisha Naika, who's with CREW, but also part of the BotSoc team. And that's working with the international kind of criteria to help us identify where the important plant areas are. And now, we're a BotSoc that responds to the kind of latest biodiversity information as well, because we won't ever be printing out these documents. They'll be live, and as new information, when the new version of the veg map comes in or whatever, we are then able to adjust it so that our branches always have good information at their fingertips. So goal 1, if you'll recall, would be the monitoring of threatened species, and there our major agents is our work together with our partners CREW. So for those of you who don't know what CREW is, there's a link that Belinda will put down, but CREW is the custodians of rare and endangered wildflowers. They're a citizen science program which has been running since 2003, and which makes next year CREW's 20th anniversary. And it's a world-leading citizen science program. They go out. There are 3 nodes across the country, one in Cape Town, one in Makanda, one in Durban, and basically those SAMBI staff work with volunteers to give them the information that they need to go out and get to monitor our threatened plants, because we've got numerous thousands of species across the country. There aren't very many professional botanists working for the state, and people live in these areas. And if you've been attending these strike talks for a while, you'll know that our flora is seasonal. So even if you do have a lot of botanists around, you could very easily miss a plant. And also, as you know, that we have new species popping up all the time, even in areas that are well studied. So when CREW started in 2003, there were quite a lot of BotSoc members that are part of the core, and that's still maintained. Like we did an analysis recently, and more than 200 CREW members are BotSoc members and actively participating in this monitoring. So that's quite a nice contribution that citizen science people are giving. And then, we've now got these, I hope someone's spoken to this audience about iNaturalist, because, sorry, I just assumed that was taken as read. But iNaturalist is our chosen biodiversity monitoring platform in the botanical sphere. So SAMBI curates and coordinates the iNaturalist part, and there are these sets of global challenges that happen. So there's 2 a year: City Nature Challenge, which happens in our autumn, and then the Great Southern Bioblitz, which is when a bunch of the people in Southern Hemisphere came together and said, actually, our best flowering and nature observation time is in spring, so we'd like to have another challenge. So I would, at this point, if people do not know about iNaturalist, please put that in the Q&A, and then I can share some things from the website. But just to show that we've been really ramping up the involvement of our branches in this time. So the City Nature Challenge in 2021 is the first one where we really got involved in the organization and so forth of it. And we had those branches participating. And City Nature Challenge 2021, basically Pretoria was a branch of ours. It wasn't very active recently, so it was good to have them on board. And then with the Great Southern Bioblitz, we had additional branches come on board. And currently now with the City Nature Challenge, which just concluded at the beginning of May, most of our branches are now participating, and we're able to start drawing really interesting information from it. But the important thing is that it's people going out into field having fun, and learning from each other. And there's all sorts of little cool models that we can do. So, I mean, what I did for the long weekend, it's over a 64-hour period, is I started in Cape Town, went out to Winelands, went to Kogelberg, ended up on the West Coast. So essentially, naturalist tourism. And that's the kind of thing that we want to be pushing for people to have access to. One last thing is that, and I will share that screen at the end, is that South Africa is a world leader in citizen science observation. So Cape Town has basically come out top of most of the recent CNC as well as GSP challenges. And even, excuse me, our new participants like Kogelberg, excuse me, like the Kogelberg branch. I'm going to have to mute and do a proper, excuse me. So when the Kogelberg branch took part in the first Great Southern Bioblitz last year, we did a webinar on that. They essentially ended up in the top 10 on the planet. And the leader, Sandy Immelman, basically was someone who, when she started getting interested in iNaturalist a month before the challenge, had 4 observations on iNat. So she was a completely new to the platform, and now she's got more than 1,000 observations, and yeah, she's catching up with me. and that just shows, I think people sometimes get intimidated about what they need to do in order to get involved with conservation and delivering a contribution, and there's a very low ceiling actually. It just starts with doing something. Right, so with goal 2, which is contributing towards the protection of, or increasing the protected area estate, we have a contractor up in KZN, Isabel Johnson, who's a fantastic field botanist. I learned so much from her. And she does specialist support for stewardship. Again, stewardship is a webinar we've worked on, but if you don't know what it is, there is it's a contractual relationship between a landowner and an entity. It can be a state entity or an NGO, to change the status of the land to a protected area. So once you've gone through the steps of surveying out the land, agreeing a management plan and so forth, and it's declared, then it will have the same status as a nature reserve. And her work is essential out there. In the last 2 or 3 years, she's been part of the declaration of at least 5 or 6 sites and the assessment of more than a dozen. And we've done an interview on her and her work, which Belinda will put in the chat. And the really interesting stuff up there is also in the grasslands, most of these farms that go into stewardship are production farms and active, and there's still an element of grazing. So the post-declaration FELF assessment is essential to track that the management of the farm is not messing with the primary land use, which is conservation, in terms of losing species or so forth. So it's a really great work. It's the kind of thing we're actually looking for more support for, and we'll be doing. I've got a fundraising application that we want to put in the next couple of months to try and get support so that we can download Isabel onto some of the younger botanists that are around to continue this work, because it's essential. Mentoring in our space is absolutely essential. And so Isabel and I are also on the National Stewardship Task Team. She is on the Isenvelo KZN task team as well for stewardship. I'm on the Western Cape Stewardship Reference Group. So that's how we understand where the new protected areas are. And for example, crew will go out as well and help do assessments, or after a site is declared, go and check if there's any more interesting threatened species. So this is how we bring the work together in the conservation space. And this is one of the things that Isabel's been really excited about in the last year or so is that Ingwe Nature Reserve in the Midlands is 1,000 hectares more than of critically endangered habitat and really diverse. And as happens in this space, once landowners hear about conservation as an option and the process, then they get interested too. So ultimately her work, and this is just one node that she's working in, essentially gives a potential 6,000 hectare corridor of connected endangered and interesting habitat. And you can see it's there are rivers, and it's very cool landscape as well. We did do a blog on Ingwe recently. Cool. So then with goal 3, and this is really one which we're pretty proud of, is that in my experience as a BotSoc member and an official previously and still now, people really tend to get excited about when land is transformed, when it's too late. When the bulldozers are pulling up on site, the process has happened already. And we put together a environmental impact assessment training course, which deals with the entire process. We look for Bert from Enviro Insights helped us design a fantastic course. So there's 8 lectures detailing the entire process, how to use the screening tool, which is another exciting new thing we've got in our arsenal that we didn't have 5 years ago. And how to supply a written comment, because actually in South Africa, we're very fortunate that our environmental legislation provides quite a bit of time and space for civil society to interact. So you register as an interested affected party, you then get all the information, you're able to comment, your comments have to be dealt with in the compilation of the document. And we did a trial course with 18 branch reps from across the country last year. And then we've now put that information on our website exclusively for BotSoc members. Essentially, there's 2 tiers to this. The first one is we want our members to be empowered about the process and interact with it. However, if they are going to participate in an EIA on behalf of BotSoc, we need them to have done the course or to work through people at their branches who have done the course, as well as with me, because we need to have our inputs as BotSoc at a certain standard so that they get taken seriously, and also so that we can get into the groove of what good report interaction with the EIA process to look like, because it tends to either be too late or antagonistic, and we want to be adding value through this process. Just check time. Cool. So goal 3 with the threatened plants. Again, Belinda, if you could stick the webinar for the succulent crisis in there, or if you don't have it, I'll get you the link later. Is that we're key partners to the national response strategy to address the illegal trade in South African succulent flora. And if you haven't heard by now, we've really got a big issue. Since 2019, there's been more than 1 million plants, succulents mostly, but also increasingly bulbs, removed from the wild for export, basically, without permission, without permits. And it really becomes a massive issue on 2 fronts. A, we're losing our plants, and sometimes we don't even have them in situ collections, so in garden collections. So there's a very real chance of them going extinct. And then B, our botanical gardens are left with, once if people are caught, they're left with these massive boxes full of plants that need homes and not allowed to move them elsewhere because this is evidence in a criminal case. So you have the botanical gardens who already have their own preset mandate and targets and things that they need to do, suddenly getting this emergency, very resource intense burden as well. So, it really is a crisis on many fronts. But the good thing about this response strategy is that all of us in the sector have pulled together. There are roles that have been allocated, work groups, and so on. And yeah, we hope to have something positive out of it. But there's a lot of work that needs to be going in. So we're working to bring together partners. So last year at the Calitzdorp Vetbandfeest, for example, afterwards we brought together some of the conservation partners in the area just to kind of get cohesion about the area, so about the plan. So there we've got growers, Sandbeek, Cape Nature, WWF-SA, Rooiberg Breeder Conservancy, and the Calitzdorp Succulent Society. And that's what we can do as BotSoc, is to bring together these people who wouldn't necessarily always talk to each other straight. And then because we now have a focused idea of what the needs are, we've applied for funding as part of a consortium with the Wilderness Foundation South Africa, as well as Conservation South Africa. Then also in this propagation space, this is we were talking about the working with botanical gardens, is that our branch in KZ in Inland in Pietermaritzburg works very closely with the garden there. They've got a regular planting group. And then at the same time, because Isabel Johnson is involved there, we'll go to stewardship sites and other areas where she's spotted endangered plants especially, and go out and take seed and cuttings, bring them back. And that's, again, for use in the propagation group. Seed collection for the Millennium Seed Bank project. And the idea then with the propagation is both that there'll be a collection, conservation grade collections in the botanical gardens, but also as a reservoir for when some of these sites, these stewardship sites, have lost species, or there are historic records of them being there, we're able to have material to plant it back out again. So that's also ecological restoration. But it's key in how we take it forward. And the model of this branch is definitely something that we are looking at increasing. My role is to make sure that Millennium Seed Bank and our branches across the country are connected, so that they can be a synergy in terms of, the branches, when they're doing their field work, either collecting seed with MSB or pointing them out to where there are populations of target species. Then goal 5, with increasing awareness and building botanical capacity. Yeah, we've had some fun trying to figure out the best way of how to do this. So we've got the Free State Branch Conservation Project, which is essentially this vegetation type that you can see on the right is Bloemfontein Caroid Shrubland, or GS8 is the code in the veg map. And it's something that they've been concerned about for a long time, because it was least concern on the vegetation map, but around Bloemfontein, there's a lot of development in this vegetation type. And they raised it with the BotSoc a few years ago. And when we were looking to do these small branch conservation projects, we went to them, or we asked the branches, what are your concerns? This is the one that they put on the table. And we were able to work with Free State University's Botany Department and Prof. Andri van Aert to put together basically a research project where the university would go out and monitor this vegetation type, because there was some foundational work done by Professor Bram de Preer, who's unfortunately passed away, in 2016, where he did remote sensing as well as flying over the Free State with a helicopter to see, because it's quite a distinct signature that you can see. It's on these dolerite sheets. And now they're going out and monitoring them and feeding back that information to the vegetation map team, as well as involving our branch with some of the field work and so forth. So it's a very nice way of spending not that much money, but getting a very significant botanical feedback, which ties directly into the conservation work of the country and the prioritization. And that's what we're trying to do all the time, is just get that feedback loop growing. Then we spend a lot of time on our social media platforms in terms of making sure that when we put out information that it's correct and accessible and looks nice, so that people can be attracted to the BotSoc work and just enjoy the plants. Like just it took me a while, as John said in my introduction, that I was really focused on threatened species, but now I'm getting to the point where I can appreciate the aesthetics of even common plants. And we run these monthly conservation webinars the last Thursday of every month on various plant conservation topics, and also trying to pull in information which is targeted in a veld and flora. So I'll try and write for each veld and flora, but to take something like ecological restoration and put it in a form which is easily digestible for people to use. So that's some of the stats from our webinar. The nice thing about the webinars is that they seem to have legs and get used. People return and view them afterwards. We've got the University of Pretoria, which is using them as a lecture aid for their second years. So it's a pretty decent source of information. And this is one of the articles. So I was talking about ecological restoration that we put out, where Q has put out a list of 10 golden rules of restoration, and then we got permission to adapt them for local conditions, and that's what we've done. And this is one of our most popular blogs as well, because people want to know what restoration is. There's unfortunately, wherever there's money, there are a lot of people trying to take advantage of restoration for all sorts of things, and we just want to put information in place to see that there's an ecological framework that people have access to guide and inform. So that's the end of my formal presentation. We really are looking at increasing our footprint in the conservation space. Those are our contact details, and I could definitely, if you go to the contact us tab on the BotSoc website, our details are there. So our GM, Antonia de Barros's email, my own, and we can definitely connect you to the branches where you are. So it's not just Cape-based, we're a national and international organization, and we look forward to interacting more with people. We really do want to get this plant conservation engine running across the country. You guys can all help us. So thank you very much.
Sure. Mr. Rupert, I think that was just so beautiful. Thank you so much for this awesome presentation. And I've been monitoring our chat as well. And, everybody's just, just talking about how awesome it is, the different types of things that you have. Roger saying this is fascinating example of the power of private citizens. If they can work together, how can people living abroad assist in the campaigns besides donating money, for instance? And there's been some really cool stuff coming up. But let me rather leave you with that one for now, just so that you can, because I think it's quite significant and quite important. Yeah.
Sure. So obviously donating money is important, but like the thing is now with us being connected like this, our branches, for example, are having their meetings virtually as well. If you're someone who's interested in identification of plants, for example, we always need that sort of backup on iNaturalist, and I can do a screen share in a bit just to show how that would be done. Yeah, like I've actually written an article recently, which we'll also dump in the chat, about how volunteering isn't just like getting hands-on in the garden, but actually, writing to your local political representatives, or working with children or whatever, but essentially, because, and especially people on this call, you've got access to internet, and so forth. You've all people who've got your own skills, and you need to think about how do you make a contribution to conservation from your own skill point of view. So the example that I put in my in the article was just, if you were an accountant, you could help a branch with their books for the month kind of thing, and there would be like a couple of hours work for a specialist, whereas for an amateur in finance, it would take a very long time. So it's like unleashing that sort of potential in our membership base and just in general society to play those sort of roles. Yeah, Roger, let me know if that was a good enough answer. Belinda, thank you for highlighting our quarterly Felt and Flora magazine. It's something we're really proud of. And it's a cracking read, if I have to say so myself.
Sure. I think it's worthwhile while we have you on the line, just perhaps to get some intel information into the Botanical Society. What are the current expansion plans? Where are you guys hoping to, kind of which direction are you currently looking at? I know you've got a very strong national footprint, and you're also quite global. But what are the next expansion plans that you guys have as a?
Do you mind if I scroll back to one of the maps?
Yes, please
Yeah,
go for it.
It's always nice to talk to a picture.
Yeah.
Okay, so currently our Cedarburg and Albany branch are not up and running. And we've got a few members in Limpopo, so there's not like a branch committee up and running yet, but there's 2 or 3 members there that are like super active. So you will see in the last the City Nature Challenge, there's all of a sudden like a bloom of involvement with Limpopo, but it's, you know, these things don't happen spontaneously. We find a member, we say, hey, are you interested in doing stuff? And they say yes. And then because we work with Crew, for example, they also do youth development workshops talking about plant conservation and so forth. So the Crew team went out last year to Limpopo and had a 3-day workshop with students there at the Toyandu, the new botanical garden from Sanby. So what I'm saying is, it's not an overnight success. You actually need to build these things in place. It starts with willing people, and then we can scramble the resources that we have to get to that place and then get some action going. And then you'll see in the City Nature Challenge, now we've got 1,000 observations from Limpopo, where last year there was nothing. And our other branches are good. I mean, you'll see there's a massive hole here over the Northern Cape, for example. But that's due to the fact that like the historically our presence has been associated largely with botanical gardens, and the only botanical garden in the Northern Cape currently is Nieuwoudtville, which is kind of on the boundary there where you see Cedarburg. Yeah. But for example, our Free State branch have been engaging with people in Kimberley, so they're keen to knock on. We're actually quite a small office, so our thing is really to do you know, the assists from where we can. So we make contacts. For example, our branch chair in Pretoria, someone that contacted us online. You know, he just saw something on Twitter and wanted to get involved, and now he's the branch chair. And Pretoria is like one of our more kind of active, growing branches with a very strong youth emphasis. So there's all sorts of ways and means of expansion, and so for then, you know, we're open to working with partners as well.
Awesome. No, this is really encouraging. You know, I love how you make it sound like you are punching up, you know, above your weight. I think with all the wonderful work that you do, one would think that it comes quite easy for you to be able to do this. And speaking of resources specifically, what are the types of income generation methodologies Botanical Society have? Is it exclusively fully dependent on donations and membership, or do you have any other sources?
So that's been the that's been the historical model, is that membership and donations is pretty much most of our income. Like I said, we're starting to apply for project income, or not income, projects to do conservation projects, which is aligned to our existing work. And yeah, that's the kind of space we're going to have to start moving into, more being innovative, crowdfunding, you know, clicking on our QR code on the website to donate. We've just started with doing some events as well. We recently had a really nice bee pollinator event at Kirstenbosch, where you know, people got to learn about how to pollinate plants in the garden, but also did a honey tasting, and we also managed to infuse the conservation work in there as well. We've got an upcoming event for kids during the school holidays, which people need to look out for on our social media. Yeah, so we have to also, you know, reinvent our wheel to today's realities.
Sure. I must say, one thing that I've you know, over the years of working at Kirstenbosch specifically and interacting with members from the Botanical Society, one thing that always fascinates and excites me is the sense of community and the sense of family that the Botanical Society has. And I always, you know, it always fascinates me, you know, being able to build that type of culture within an organization where there's just so much enthusiasm and support, and just the spirit of volunteerism.
Yeah.
I think you're doing an absolute amazing work on that front, and I just want to congratulate for you. I think you guys have a blueprint of how organizations should actually interact in terms of, you know, working with one another, and it's absolute a marvel to observe and see from outside.
Cool, thanks, John. I'm seeing quite a few questions, so can I dip into those?
Yes, please. I was actually going to jump into Esther there, and Hazel. Yeah, go for it. Go for it. Do you want me to read that out for you?
No, I've got it in front of me. So thanks, John.
All right, cool. Go for it.
Okay, so Esther, Richtersveld is very far from any one of our branches at the moment. However, Peter van Wyk, who's the curator of the botanical garden up there, so they've got a Sandbox botanical garden, which has got an agreement with Sandby, so they're a partner garden. And we're trying to figure out how we can help him as well. The area is in crisis. There's a lot of climate change impacts. There's a lot of poaching. Peter has been like over his head with responding to the poaching challenges for those rare succulents. But they've also got some international funding currently for expanding their growing areas. And so that they can also start, so we don't just have the collections, one Kirstenbosch, one in Worcester and so forth, but to make sure that there's a response available. And so, yeah, like I think if you wanted to help Richtersveld, it would be a good idea to contact me, and then I can put you in touch with Peter. Yeah, so you can put my email in the chat there, please, Belinda. Then I'm going to go to Hazel. Hazel, I'm first going to go to your question in the, sorry?
I just wanted to just mention that, you know, for the benefit of everybody that's on the call, if you could also mention what the question is, so that when you answer, then everybody.
Oh, excuse me.
Yes.
Sorry. So Esther's question was about which branch is looking after the Richtersveld area, and she was concerned that there seemed to be a bit of a crisis there, and that was a good observation, but it's not an insurmountable crisis. I think we always need to look about what we can do, and there's a lot we can actually do to support the work that's going there. It's not like there's nothing that we can do. There's very committed people up there already. Then Hazel, your question here is, Sandby currently has many graduate internship programs and training of young conservationists and botanists. How is BotSoc driving the agenda to support more of this type of initiative, including in the different sectors? Yeah, so this is all on our list of things that we want to do. We in the past, we did host internship programs like Groensebenze and so forth at the Botanical Society. Currently, we're more supporting, I mean, Crew's got interns and we work closely with them. Yeah, like some sort of mentorship essentially, because not just myself, but there's a lot of wisdom and plant experiences locked up in our branches. And that's why we've got a program to give away several hundred memberships to youth between the age of 18 and 25, but specifically so that they can, not just for the sake of getting a membership so you can get a felt and flora, but to bring them into the branches so that they can interact with our knowledgeable, sometimes older people there. Because the catchphrase we throw is intergenerational knowledge transfer, right? Because you need everyone knows that mentorship is like super important. And when your mentorship is fun, like you on a field trip, you're not just sitting in a lecture, you're on a field trip and you're with someone who actually does know every plant and can tell you about the ecology of the area. We've got those people. Those are our members. So we want to be bringing people in for our members to share that knowledge. So it's not centralized. You only get it from the webinar or when you work with Crew. Our members are like that resource. Like, and I know this because I am a member myself. So that's kind of what we've got. But we definitely do want to work in the direction of like more kind of formal programs for internship, because there's a desperate need for botanical skills in this country.
Nice. Sorry, and while you add that, Mr. Rupert, so what levels of kind of memberships do you have? Like, if you could break it down and say,
sure,
this is the type of volunteer member that we may want or may be interested. This is the type of skills that we currently employing. And this is the type of consultants that we want to work with. Are you able to break it down like that?
Sure. Not in the amount of time we've got, because remember there's 16 targets to the National Plant Conservation Strategy, and each one we've got ideas on.
Awesome.
But I think people should check out our conservation strategy and just go and check out. We've got a lot of information online already. And then make contact with us, but be quite targeted. You know, people will sometimes say, email me and say, I want to help. Say, I want to help with either money or time. These are my skills and so forth. So that you know, we save an email where I have to ask, what would you like to do?
Awesome. Yeah, let's go to Becca.
Yeah. So Becca's question is, are we doing any work with traditional healers? We are actually. So there's a really cool project up in Eslanzeni district municipality up in Mpumalanga, where there was something done called a biodiversity management plan, which is like something that the Department of Environment, Fishery and Forestry do in concert with SANBI. And essentially you put together, if there's a species or a group of species that are in trouble, you put together a BMP for that with certain targets and actions. So there's a cycad BMP, there used to be one for mountain zebra, for the African penguin. And we noticed as a sector that up in Mpumalanga, and please go and look at our medicinal plants webinar, because all the stats are in there. But up in Mpumalanga, there were 6 species, threatened species, that were really struggling. And so, and they were chosen deliberately because, remember, there's more than 2,000 species or 650 species get used in the country for medicinal purposes. But there's 6 threatened ones, and those ones were chosen because they have different kind of life histories. So we've got a tree, pepperbark, succulents, Hortheopsis, and a bulb, which name has changed, but I still call it by the old name, Mawillia. And so those 6 come together and basically see what's the response, what's the status of them in the wild, do we know how to grow them, are they still found in habitat? And for some of them, people are now having to bring them in from Mozambique and elsewhere, because they're kind of functionally extinct in South Africa. So then the BMP is there for those 6 species. Now, the implementation of the biodiversity management plan is something that we are funding and working with SANBI and other partners on the ground on, because the project lead there, Nolwazi Mbongwa, is a traditional healer and a scientist. So we now get great information in when we go in, when she and Tabo go out and talk to the communities. You know, there's no language barrier or cultural barrier. We're able to have like a really good feedback in terms of what's the status on the ground. And then another element of it would be to actually start growing these plants for distribution to the traditional healers. So that's the answer so far, Becca. But again, keep an eye on BotSoc channels. We'll probably be putting a lot more information out shortly.
Awesome. Yeah, you know, those levels of being a BotSoc member comes up from Kululeko, who's currently a Durban University of Technology student, saying, you know, being a horticulturist, how do I get involved? And I think you've kind of touched on that.
Yeah, no, definitely. Kululeko dropped me a mail because, you know, out of those 650 medicinal plants, we only know how to grow a few hundred. So there's a nice little challenge for you, Hazel. And Hazel, I'd love to talk to you offline as well about seeing how we can support you in terms of just information and connecting you to people in plant conservation.
Awesome. I think we've pretty much covered just a very good broad overview. But I think what this presentation has done is also involved quite a lot of links, you know, during the presentation. And I loved how interactive that was, you know, to be able to link to some other interviews that were interrelated to the presentation and topic and BotSoc as in its entirety. So what we will do,
sorry, John, I just want to answer that last question there from Roger. So
yeah, please go for it.
Roger's asking if we have an overseas branch for the many South Africans living abroad which would be interested. We don't have an overseas branch per se, but there is an overseas membership category. And so if you check out the membership categories or the join tab on our website, and through that, then you'll be getting our kind of regular correspondence. So we send out newsletters, and I send out the conservation emailer once a month as well. But like, if there's call for enough of you to band together so that we do something virtually, we could definitely, I mean, that's what Zoom is there for.
Very important, very important. This just comes to show the global appeal of what the organization does. And I think it stems from its values and the culture that you've been able to build, and, you know, the interaction with all the members and volunteers. Now, I think it's good for us to wrap it up here. We've learned quite a thing or two about Botanical Society of South Africa. We are extremely excited, and I think a lot of us, you know, I think with the many different projects that you've got with crew, with citizen science, volunteer programs that you've got, the different types of events that you've just mentioned now, I think there's a plethora of opportunities for all of us to join in and actually interact with the organization and see how we can become involved. So thank you very much for that amazing presentation.
Thanks, John.
Absolutely amazing. And yeah, we need to have this type of presentation more and more, just with the beautiful work that you guys are currently doing as an organization. So thank you for that. Ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the end of our Wednesday talk with Mr. Rupert Koopman, who is a conservation manager at the Cape Nature, as well as a Botanical Society.
Sorry, only Botanical Society.
Only Botanical Society.
Cape Nature was my previous position.
Oh, yes. Botanical Society. Yes. So I think it's, you know, working together, we can definitely do amazing work to make sure that we preserve and manage the sustainability of looking after our environment. So thank you very much for that. Let me take this opportunity to thank all our partners for making this possible. Room to Grow, as well as Straight Nature. Let me take this opportunity to thank everybody working behind the scenes, Belinda and the team back at Straight Nature. Once again, thanking Kathy for always going out of her way to finding these amazing speakers that make this possible. Yeah, and we look forward to welcoming each and every one of you at Kirstenbosch National Botanical Garden. Botanical Society membership also opens up to all the different facets of botanical gardens that we've got around the country, and we've got 9 of them around the country. So please go out,
11.
visit, take
You
your
must
family.
keep current. There's Kwelecha in East London, and
Yeah,
also Toyandu, which is just opened up. So yeah, no.
yeah, yes,
We are
yes.
growing
In
the
fact, yeah, in
plant
fact,
world.
we've
So
got,
Sam is doing great work there.
it's doing very great work. Kwelecha in East London is actually undergoing a very massive construction project. So it's really exciting stuff to be seen there. So lots of fun stuff to be seen and experienced. So yeah, we look forward to more great stuff coming up. So from myself, John, it's been an absolute pleasure. Mr. Rupert, let me give you this one last bite. Last word to you and to everybody that's still on the platform.
Yeah, thank you for listening, firstly. And then please join the BotSoc. We love to interact with you. And as John says, we look forward to see what we can come up with together towards solving some of these environmental issues. And they're not issues, you know, they're challenges where we can, and there's ways forward on it. So there is a roadmap.
Awesome. I couldn't have summed it up myself better. So thank you very much to Mr. Rupert Koopman. And thanks to everybody that's joined us this morning. Have a fantastic long weekend ahead. Stay safe. Remember to mask up, maintain social distancing. Remember to sanitize, and let's just stay safe as we're building up to just greater outdoors together. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a fantastic day. Cheers, Mr. Rupert.
Cheers. Bye, everyone.
Catch up with you soon. Bye.